We're about to start a whole new section now. Jujigatami from top position. We've just looked at a huge amount of information on Jujigatami applied from bottom position, supine and seated. Now we're going to switch angles to Jujigatami, chest to chest, top position. You're on top of your opponent. The two main scenarios we find ourselves using Jujigatami from are mounted position and side mounted position, along with the variations of that, north, south, etc. There's also knee on belly. We'll spend some time on that, but really the majority of our entries from top position into Jujigatami usually occur out of side control positions or mounted positions. I want to start off with some introductory notes on top position Juji. There's some things you got to know here. Ultimately, in Jujigatami, your butt is going to be on the floor. That means that if you start on top of your opponent in either mounted position or side mounted position, you got to take a risk. You're going to have to get off that position and down and put your butt on the floor and apply the Jujigatami. So there's some risk involved here. You're trading the desirability of holding a good pinning position, the mount, side control, with the greater desirability of submitting your opponent, but it comes at the risk that if the submission doesn't work, you just lost the mounted position, or you just lost the side position. Now that cost you something. You had to take your opponent down, you had to pass his guard, you had to do something to get to that position. Now you're taking the risk of a submission, and one where if it doesn't work, you're now out of that position. It's a strange thing. You know, when I first started encouraging people to go for leg locks, everyone would criticize and say, you know, if those leg locks don't work, you're going to end up in the bottom position. For some reason, Jujigatami has always gotten a free pass on this. I don't know why, because it's actually even worse. At least if you go for a leg lock inside someone's guard, you were in a neutral position, you went backwards, you didn't really lose that much. Here, you fall out of the mounted position, you're losing something, okay? So if I'm going to go for a Jujigatami from the mounted position or the side position, you better believe I must have a high set of, I must have a firm belief in my ability to go through and finish it. I'm taking a considerable risk here. So a big part of what I'm going to be teaching you is essentially risk management. Okay, you've got a good position on top. You could just be happy and just stay with that. But you want to take that additional step and go beyond just positional control into submission. You're going to have to learn how to manage risk. That's a big part of what I teach. Now, we're going to look at mounted position, side control, various other top positions, and we're going to teach you the skill of managing risk satisfactorily so that we can go with confidence from a good position to a clean finish. Okay, that you're not afraid to go from something you've already worked hard to attain and go beyond it into a realm of submissions above position. But learning how to do that is going to take time. And there is that psychological component of risk. You have to learn how to pull the trigger. Okay, you have to learn to go from a good situation to a better one, and at the possible risk that you might lose that good situation. That takes some mental confidence on your part. So a big part of what I'll be coaching you over the next few sections is how to develop that confidence, how to give you techniques and tactics where the risk is put down into a level where it's manageable, it's workable, and you're not afraid to go forward and try a submission out of an already strong position. We're going to start off with the mounted position. Jujigatami out of the mounted position. This can be a very frustrating thing. I know you've all had, I've seen so many people come to me over the years and like, you know, mounted position without punches, I can't get anything going. I feel unstable. I try to go for a Jujigatami, the guy just pulls his arms out. Let's first start to understand some of the problems involved in Jujigatami from the mount and then start looking at solutions. Let's have a training partner who's down in the mounted position. Okay, first off, let's understand something about the nature of the human body. One of the strongest structures in the entire human body is the structure of elbow to hip. Okay, if Placido just sits up and locks his elbows into his hips, and I stand over him from a situation where we lock hands together in like so, and I try to pull him off the floor, you will see that his whole body comes off the mat before his elbows leaves his hips. So once again, he's got his elbows locked to his hips. When I go to lift, his whole body comes off the mat before his elbows go away from his hips. human beings are weak in many, many ways. But one way that human beings are strong is elbow to hip. Okay, even weak infantile human beings can easily maintain elbow to hip position. And when we get into pulling contests, it's very, very hard to pull someone's elbows away from the hip. As a general rule, the further the elbow gets away from the hip, the weaker the limb becomes. So we're always looking to extend people's elbows away from the hips and bring the elbow up to the shoulder line. Okay, so if we have an opponent down on the floor, like so. What is my opponent's shoulder line? That is the line that joins my training partner's two shoulders. Okay. If that ruler is underneath my opponent, you can clearly see Placido's shoulder line. What I always try to do in any Jujigatami entry from the mounted position is I try to take my training partner's elbows up to the shoulder line. If I can bring my opponent's elbows to the shoulder line, I will attack with submissions, especially Jujigatami, on many, many occasions. The further I can bring my opponent's elbow above the shoulder line, the better things get. But the shoulder line is my minimum. I try hard to go beyond. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. But this is my minimum goal. I'm always looking to take his elbows, at least one of them, up to the shoulder line at a minimum, and preferably beyond. Okay? If I can do this, the risk associated with Jujigatami from mounted position is low, and I will often be able to score the move. If I cannot, the risk associated with Jujigatami is unacceptably high, and I will not attempt Jujigatami. There's better things I can do. I'll say this again. This is the iron law of elbow and shoulder. If I'm mounted on my training partner and I can bring his elbow up to the shoulder line and preferably even beyond, the risk associated with Jujigatami is acceptably low, and I will go for the move. If I cannot, I will not. There's better things I can do in that situation. Things that involve less risk and have a higher reward to risk value. So the whole question is, how are we going to get our opponent's elbow up to the shoulder line when you know damn well one of the strongest structures of the human body is to keep the elbow down by the hip? How are we going to do that? We need some tricks. We need some mechanical tricks of leverage to get it done. Let's look at what I believe is the most effective method, the finger walking method. We have an opponent down on the floor. However we've done it, we've gotten into the mounted position. Okay. First things first, we need to stabilize ourselves. Okay. When we get stable on our training partner, our feet will always be relatively close together. I have the choice here between locked feet and toes crossed over, just like so. I can take various kinds of body posture, but when it's time to attack Jujigatami, one of the first things I want to get into the habit of is controlling my training partner's head. I'm going to take my hand inside his hand, and as a result, I can pommel through and get to a cross face on my training partner. When I take the cross face, my middle finger controls my training partner where the lat muscle meets the armpit. Try to avoid grabbing people by the jaw. I often see this kind of thing. You're much better off going through under the lat muscle and controlling the cross face from here. Now, as Placido keeps his elbows in close, I'm going to take the sharp, bony ridge of my wrist and I'm going to work with the cross face position, my hips down low on my training partner. And I'm going to take my wrist inside the point of his elbow. From here, I begin walking my fingers. Directionality of force is critical here. If I try to walk upwards in a straight line, it's very unlikely I'm going to move his elbow because the elbow structure is so strong in this position. You can see when I try to walk straight upwards, I run into a wall of resistance and it's very, very hard for me to move his elbow. So instead, what I do is I walk his elbow in an arc, out and around. The wider the arc, the more successful I'm going to be. I put my head over the arc. I don't want my head far away and try to just walk with my hands. I want to incorporate my chest over his hand. Bring everything in close. So that my chest is over the hand. And my whole body weight, including my head, is involved in the finger walking. I start walking with his elbow coming up to my bicep. There's going to be a certain point where you can't go any further forward. He pushes down hard with his elbow and you can't go any further forward. When you see that, just straighten your arm. Now, he's going to try to clamp in with that elbow and I start walking a second time. I come back down. I adjust my body position. I start walking. He clamps down with his arm and I straighten my arm. I walk a little bit further. He clamps down on his arm. I bring my body position further up to his elbow and I start walking. He clamps down tight with his arm and I start walking until his elbow comes up to the crown of his head. Then from here, my hand grabs his tricep. And from this position, I cross my arms. When he tries to recover his elbow position, it's impossible because of the crossed arms. Then I just put my jaw over my training partner's tricep, and we've got the arm trapped exactly where we want it to be. There was a lot of details there, and a lot of it is difficult for you to observe. So let's look at them again in some additional detail. Okay, what we're trying to do is take our opponent's elbow from one of the strongest structural positions in the human body, elbow to hip, and we're trying to take it into a weak extended position above the shoulder line. The further above the shoulder line, the happier we are, okay? You've got to have a mechanical trick to get this done. You're not going to do it just with strength. So the first thing we need is control of our opponent's head. So I take inside position, okay? I'm mounted. My hand goes inside to the center line and my hand goes around the corner and we start using a cross-face action here at the lat muscle. Now, as he locks everything in tight, I'm going to use my chest to take his hand away from the center line. The closer his hand to the center line, the harder it is for me to walk his elbow. So what I want to do is start clearing the hand out of the way. Now, I take my wrist inside his elbow, just like so. And I start an action of walking in a wide arc. Don't go up, go in an arc around. Clamp in tight. There's my wrist in the inside position, and I begin walking outwards. As I walk outwards, my body crowds over the elbow that I'm moving. Now, as he clamps down as tight as he can, there comes a certain point where I can no longer move forward. When I see this, I straighten my arm and I move forward a little further. He clamps down, I bring everything out to the arm and I start walking further and further and straightening my arm. He clamps down, we walk a little further, straighten. The action is rather like a ratchet. Every time I go forward, I put myself in a position where I never go backwards. Every time he clamps down, look how I adjust my body position, walk and straighten until there comes a certain critical point where I can access his tricep. The moment that occurs, I lock my arms around each other. So when he tries to recover arm position, it's impossible. The arm is now trapped. From here, I bring my chin outside of my training partner's tricep, and I've now successfully trapped his arm far above the shoulder line in a position where Judigatami is now an acceptably low risk. The idea that I'm trying to convey to you is essentially the idea of a mechanical ratchet. For every inch that I move forward, I never move an inch back. It's always just forward, stop, forward, stop, forward, stop, until I get to my goal. My goal is that. His elbow far above the shoulder line, close to his center line. His goal is to keep everything down here. Okay? I've got to take his hands and start moving them into a mechanically weak position and then start walking outwards. Every time I get stopped, I use the extension of my arm to walk further and further towards my goal until I patiently take it up to a position of weakness. Okay? If your hands start losing contact with the mat, you're going to fail. If I start taking my hands off the mat, that's when he takes me back. I'm using the mat as my stability. If the hand comes off the mat and he clamps, he wins every time. Okay? I walk, he clamps, I lose. Okay? Remember, elbow to hip structure, the immovable elbow, as it's often called in physiological terms, is one of the strongest structures in the human body. You cannot beat the strength of elbow to hip with your arms. It's not going to happen, even when your opponent is weaker than you. Okay? Don't fight one of the strongest structures of the human body with one of your weakest, your arm. Okay? Use the floor to assist you. What makes this move work ultimately is the friction with the floor. When I do this move to people, people think it's a magic trick. They think, oh, this guy's crazy strong. I'm not strong. Okay, my student Gordon Ryan, he's strong. He's very good at this. Of all my students, he's the best at this move. But it's not because he's physically strong that it's working. It's because he's using the floor to cheat, to get his arm up into a position where it works. I'm going to demonstrate this again. You've already seen the theory of the immovable elbow. Okay? The theory that if he's in a seated position, one of the strongest structures of the human body is elbow to hip. If I fight that structure, it's a losing fight. Okay? His whole body will come off the floor before his elbows leave his hips. Okay? Don't try to fight him at his strongest point. Instead, what we do is this. I steal the inside position. I lift and I take my cross face. Now, from here, I get my elbow inside and I start the action of walking, clamp. Initially, it's very difficult, so I use hips, movement, etc., etc. Now, what enables me to do this is the lifting of my elbow. But one thing never happens. My hand never leaves the floor. Clamp down, because if my hand ever leaves the floor, clamp, then it's just his elbow to hip structure versus my hand, and he'll win every time. So I use the floor. The friction of my palm on the mat means when he tries to clamp back down to his hip, the friction with the floor makes it difficult. Okay? Bring your hand back down. The friction with the floor, go. Makes it difficult. You see he's fighting against my hand. Every time he gets tired, I walk him forward. I straighten my arm. He tries to bring the hand back, and the friction with the floor is what's making it difficult. It's not the strength of your fingers walking forward. No one's that strong. No one's fingers are that strong. He fights down. Look how my elbow moves him. And then when he tries to recover position, he never can. This is why it functions like a ratchet. Okay? When he tries to bring his elbow back, the friction with the floor prevents backward movement. So I move forward. He tries to move me back. He can't. So in the end, I'm only moving forward. Every time I straighten, make a strong arm. Every time I straighten, my body weight moving through my head helps me to straighten it. I work further forward. He tries to clamp back down. He can't because of the friction with the floor until I can lock everything up. Now when he tries to recover position, everything's locked in place. The only thing that remains is to use my head to trap everything in place and get his elbow to the center line. In this way, we can use this ratchet-like movement of stealing position and then keeping what we've stolen by using the floor as a trick, using the friction with the floor to prevent my opponent from recovering. What we don't want is to steal space and have him take it back. Every time you make this thievery of space in a northwards direction, I don't want to lose my thievery to his recovery with the elbow to hip. Okay? So it's useless if I steal some distance and then I take my hand off the floor and I lose it. I steal some distance, I take my hand off the floor and I lose it. Okay, that's worthless. Every time I move forward in these situations, I just rest. And my hand goes on the mat, he tries to recover space, and the friction saves me. Now I feel him get tired. I work a little more. He clamps down, and the friction with the mat prevents him taking it back. The wider my hands are apart, the more friction I have with the mat. I never just have my fingers on the mat. He pulls down now, not enough friction. I never just put the heel of my hand on the mat. He pulls down now, not enough friction. I maximize friction with the whole surface of my hand on the mat. He tries to bring it down, so difficult. Now stronger. From here, leverage through a moving head, walking, he clamps down, friction, and then we make the catch. Now I hunch my shoulders forward, so when I can easily get my chin over the top. When he tries to recover his arm position now, it's almost impossible. And in this way, we can get spectacular results over time with this method of advancing our opponent's hand to a position of strength to one of extreme weakness, the ratchet method. This method is the one which I coach to my students above all others. All of my students excel in it. You've often seen them make use of it in competition. Learn these principles, have faith in the ability of friction between your hand and the mat to create this ratchet effect, and very soon you'll be having success with it too. Now we're looking at this iron law of elbow and shoulder line. We've seen when our opponent is down, we have a shoulder line going across the line of his two shoulders, straight line that joins the two shoulders. We're always looking to take his elbow above that line. The further it goes above, the better off we are. Okay. We saw the number one method of actually doing this, the ratchet, and we saw this is an incredibly mechanically strong method of taking his elbow out of a strong position, even against powerful resistance, and getting into a position where we can start to attack Jujigatami. My general rule is very simply stated. I won't even try a Jujigatami until I can get my opponent's elbow at a minimum up to his shoulder line. It's not worth it if I can't. There's better things I can do. But if I can get it up to the shoulder line or beyond, I'm definitely going to be thinking about trying Jujigatami. It can be tough sometimes just getting that ratchet system to work when people keep everything in very, very close. Okay. So I just want to emphasize the idea of my wrist position and how my wrist always fits inside my training partner's elbow, the point of his elbow. Okay. If my opponent is an idiot and just has his arms in weak, convoluted positions, there's no need for me to do any of this kind of thing. I'll just go straight from here. Okay? I'll just physically grab a hold of my training partner's arm and go to work. But good people, and the idea ultimately is for you to be able to beat good people, not people that suck. We have to work against this strong structure. Okay. So often I see people demonstrate moves from mounted position, and the moves are predicated on the idea that my opponent is a dunderhead. Okay. So for example, you often say, well, if my opponent pushes on my chest, then from here I should bring my hands in position and jump into Jujigatami. No one who knows anything about jiu-jitsu is ever going to push on your chest in this position. They're all going to keep their elbows in tight. Okay. Sometimes you will see people say, well, if my opponent turns in a given direction, I can put my foot up and I can attack the upright elbow. Yes, of course you can, but who the hell is going to turn in such a naive fashion as this and offer me a free elbow? No one is. The real challenge is to be able to take our opponent's arms into positions of weakness when they're currently in positions of strength, and he wants to keep them there. When he stays flat on the ground, his elbows are in tight, and periodically he's moving his hips and bumping and bridging, taking me out of balance, and then he's turning just enough to be able to threaten an elbow escape and put me back in guard. That's the challenge, okay? That's the interesting question. How are we going to get this guy's elbow up to the center line under those conditions? That's where things start getting interesting, okay? We're looking at this idea that we steal inside position. I can never go here and have him take the inside position on me. I'll never hit an effective crossface. So our first thing is always inside position. My hand goes to the center line. So initially we're here on the floor, my hand goes to the center line, and as a result we get through and we get that crossface that we're always looking for. Now I like to start, arms in tight, by getting an angle on my training partner. Okay? If I try to go straight from no angle and he clamps that elbow in tight, it can be very hard to get underneath. So I often start by getting angle across the shoulder line, and then from here I start that walking action. I've got a good bite underneath my training partner's elbow. Now if he tries to clamp in from here, look how we always start the action of coming down towards the elbow. If I'm too far forward and I try to walk, I can't make any progress. So I come down to the elbow. I start the action of walking. He clamps down tight and we start that first action. Moving, moving, moving. Look how every time I move out, my head moves to the center line. And it's that action which starts straightening out his arm and giving me what I ultimately want. A situation where I can lock around his head and arm and bring my shoulders forward. When he tries to pull his elbow out, it's almost impossible. It's locked inside my shoulder. Then from here, I bring my chin over the top, and we've got his elbow trapped across the center line, and we're ready to play now with Jujigatami. Okay? In this way, you'll be able to take even fiercely resisting opponents and get their elbow out of position and start your Jujigatami game. Always remember that the key element is to assess where is your opponent's elbow in relation to the shoulder line, and the iron law can be stated very simply. Until the elbow passes the center line, Jujigatami is not a good option. The further the elbow goes above the shoulder line, the better the Jujigatami option becomes. Now, we've looked at the idea of the relationship between elbow and shoulder line. We've looked at the ratchet method of taking his elbow to the shoulder line. Now it's time to actually go in there and actually apply the Jujigatami. So we've successfully taken our opponent's elbow up, and now we want to finish the guy. We want to make the transition. As I said earlier, this is all about risk management. You're taking a risk. You're on top of them. You're mounted. You could just stay there and hold on and look good from mounted position. But you're the kind of guy who wants to go further and actually start submitting people. I like your mindset, but I've got to give you the tools to actually get it done. What I don't want you doing is haphazardly jumping from a mounted position to an armbar. That's what we're consciously trying to avoid. What I want to see you doing is methodically working your way from one control position to another until you fall with control into a Jujigatami. You've heard me say this 1,000 times on this video already, but I've got to say it again. Every Jujigatami is a control of your opponent's shoulder first and an attack on the elbow second. So the natural question is, how are we going to control this guy's shoulder from the mounted position? When we were underneath people, we did it with top locks. How are we going to do it from mounted position? Let's have a look at that right now. Let's have an opponent like so. We've managed to walk his arm up into a position where it's gone up like so, and we're in a position now to start attacking. The first thing I'm going to do is start to form an angle on my opponent and take advantage of his exposed armpit. Remember, the shoulder and the armpit are essentially the same thing. They're in there together, it's just a different side. I'm going to take my knee up to my training partner's exposed armpit, just like so. So you can see my head, my knee has come up to the crown of my training partner's head. Okay, that's always my goal. Now, from here, once I bring my knee up into this position, it's time for me to start turning an angle across my training partner. I'm going to take my second leg, and my weight is going to go over my supporting leg like so. How do I know I'm doing a good job of this? Because my head goes over my own knee. What does this do? It creates an unweighted leg on the other side. And as a result, we can make the turn. You will notice when I take this position, my leg slopes forward and points in the direction of the Jujigatami, just as it did from bottom position. This leg here becomes my direction leg. This leg here blocks my training partner's shoulder, just like so, and forms a wedge around my opponent. When he goes to move in this position, it's very, very difficult. You've got an excellent stable platform to work from. Now, we're going to pass our hand through and grab our own thigh. I bring my head over my own knee. I am now in a stable position. We know that there's a second problem now, and that is the problem of bringing my leg, my cross-face leg, in the smallest arc possible over the head. I don't want to be naive and take some big silly step over my opponent's head like so. Okay, my opponent can easily time this and pull his elbow free, and now you end up in a dreadful situation where you were mounted, he gets up on top, and now you're underneath with nothing. Okay, that's the worst case scenario, where you went from a great position to nothing, bottom, and nothing to show for it. Okay, it's the very thing we're trying to avoid. So we've got to be very careful how we manage a bunch of things. The three most important things that we have to manage are the contact of my hips to my opponent's shoulder, the arc of my cross-face leg, minimizing that as much as possible, and the risk of ending up in bottom position if the Jujigatami should fail for whatever reason. Okay, so with those three elements in mind, let's look at a situation where we've walked the arm up, and from here our first thing is to form an effective wedge underneath our training partner's shoulder. This is the top version of a top lock. In bottom position we use top locks. Here we use a knee wedge. I bring my knee up to my own shoulder. Okay. Now from here I bring my head over my own knee, and as a result my left leg becomes weightless. As a result of that, I can easily extend the leg and bring it around into our preferred attacking position, just like so. My knee is now a wedge underneath Placido's head. When he tries to take his elbow out, it's a difficult thing. This functions like a top lock. Okay, only we're on top of our opponent now instead of underneath. Now I go through and I catch my training partner's arms and hold them in. I put my head over my own knee, just like so. Okay. Now, from here, I've got to manage the risk that I'm taking when it's time to put the cross-face leg in place and then go to bottom position. The way I do this, the way I minimize the arc of my cross-face leg is by bringing my head towards my left elbow. Here's my left elbow on the floor. I bring my head towards it. And as a result, my right leg becomes unweighted. So I no longer have to take a big crazy step. I don't have to do this kind of thing. Okay, I just bring my weight over my elbow, and now it's an easy thing for me to bring my knee up to the shoulder and take a minimal step around my opponent and apply my crossface. This means that from this situation, I can now take my free hand and take an outside scoop grip on my training partner's leg. This means that if everything went wrong, at least I have control of my opponent's legs. So when he tries to come up on top of me, he'll never be able to do it. And I'll never lose the top position that I seek. Now from here, we're in perfect position to apply the Jujigatami. Okay? So the three golden rules of top position mounted Jujigatami are to form effective wedges around the shoulder. That's always the first. There must be a strong connection of my hips to my opponent's shoulder girdle. That is true for any Jujigatami. Normally in bottom position we do it with a top lock. Top position we do it with a knee wedge. My knee wedged in on his shoulder. The second key element is to reduce the arc of the movement of the cross-face leg. And I do that through a shifting of my body weight. I'll come back to that soon, don't worry. And then the critical rule for top position. I always hedge my bets when I apply a Jujigatami by taking a scoop grip on my training partner's leg, so that when he goes to scissor his legs, he cannot. And as a result, I can safely take what could potentially be a bottom position. I can safely put my buttocks on the floor so that there's no danger of my opponent coming up on top of me. And if worst case scenario, I lose the arm, etc., at least I can make a transition to other things and not end up stuck underneath my opponent with nothing to show for the risk that I took. Let's go back and show this in more detail. I want you to really master this move. So, once again, we have an opponent down on the floor. We've managed to successfully walk his arm up, probably using the ratchet method. Okay. From here, my first thing is to take my knee up here as a wedge on my training partner. Then I shift my weight over my knee. So my head comes over my knee. That's going to unweight my second foot. And as a result, I can easily turn my second foot in and make this good hook right up there inside my training partner's armpit. As my knee comes around the corner, my knee goes behind the nape of his neck so that my knee and my foot are very close together. When he goes to yank his arm out, it's a very difficult thing indeed. Now I scoop my arm inside, and from this position, I put my head over my own elbow. As a result, I'm very relaxed in this position, and it's relatively easy for me to use my unweighted left leg as a crossface, and I can quickly go over the top and lock everything in place. Then from here, I rise, I take my free arm, and I grab his leg, so that when we sit down to the floor and he tries to get up on top, it's physically impossible, and I can easily put him back down and go into a situation where I have a perfect entry into Jujigatami. Okay, those are all the details. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to perform this move several times without talking, without stopping. And I just want you to look at my performance of the move and look for those three key elements. How am I wedging the shoulder? How am I minimizing the arc of the cross-face leg? How am I preventing my opponent from scissoring his legs and potentially coming up on top of me once my buttocks hits the ground? I'm going to go through several repetitions of this move, as I said, without stopping and without talking. I want you to look at the small variations I use, take mental notes as you observe me do the moves, and we'll go from there. So we have an opponent down on the floor. I'll start from situations where we've got the arm up, just like so. Now, done in this fashion, you can clearly see that there are three major considerations which I have when I'm applying Jujigatami from the mounted position. These are forming a satisfactory connection of my hips to my opponent's shoulder girdle, the idea of minimizing the arc of my cross-face leg as it transitions from one shoulder to the other, and the idea of attaining an outside scoop grip that will prevent my opponent from getting up on top of me once I've committed my buttocks to the floor. Remember, anytime I start mounted on my opponent, if my buttocks go to the floor, I'm taking a risk of losing bottom position. I have to do something to hedge my bets. I have to do something to minimize that risk. The outside scoop grip is the single best method of doing so. Okay, we're looking at mounted Jujigatami. We've seen that there's a bit of risk involved here. You're mounted on the guy, now you got to put your ass on the floor. And there's a danger that when you try that, you're going to lose your attempted armbar. The guy gets up on top of you and you lost everything. You had a great position, now you got nothing. So we've got to do as much as possible to bring the risk down into manageable amounts so that it's worthwhile for us to go into the Jujigatami. Once we've gotten our opponent's arm up into a vulnerable position, there's one thing above all others which is going to help you secure the position and finish with authority. That's your ability to control your opponent's shoulder with your hips. Now, we spent a lot of time earlier in this video looking at how we do this from bottom position, and it was mostly bound up with the idea of a top lock. Now, I know you're asking this question: how the hell are we going to do this from on top? What's our substitute? We can't use a top lock anymore. What are we going to do? What's the trick from top position? The top position, from mount especially, is the idea of a shoulder wedge. I'll demonstrate it from this angle. Okay, we've managed to get our opponent's arm up into a vulnerable position. Now when we go to turn the corner, I'm going to focus on taking my knee past my own hand, okay? So once we lock up in this position, I'm going to take my elbow forward and I control the shoulder with my hand. Then I bring my head forward and my knee comes past and covers my own hand. So that if you were to try to look in, you would see that my fingers are covered by my own thigh. When my opponent goes to yank his arm out, it's physically impossible. All that's required now is to move my head over my own knee. I don't want to move too far. I'm going to pull him on top of me. That's not the idea. So I have to turn and I just sweep my leg around the corner. And there it is. I catch my training partner at the head. I bring his head forward so that I can put my knee as a wedge behind his neck. And that's what catches him in place. When he tries to pull his arm out, this plays the same role from top position as a top lock does from bottom. Now, I go in and I get my grips. Okay? Again, I'm completely wedged around his shoulder. No need for a top lock now. When he tries to yank out, my foot on the floor secures the position. And as a result, we can get in there and get the win. So, once again, how to properly form this critical shoulder wedge. Once we bring the arm up, I bring my head forward, I bring my hand to his shoulder, and I cover my own hand with my knee. Now from here, I have a base of support, okay? So I can start the action of turning my body like so. If he tries to come up on top, I've got a base of support here, so I'm stable. If both hands are on him and he turns into me, I fall over, okay? Now, as I go around the corner, two hands pull up on his head and expose the back of his neck. So as a result, we get that perfect wedge in behind our training partner's head and neck. Now, my two arms go around the corner and we're in the perfect position. I've got a clean wedge around my opponent's shoulder joint. When he tries to pull the arm free, it's almost impossible. And you've got true control of this man's body. Our whole goal is to get our knee underneath the nape of his neck, just like so. Okay, but we need techniques to get this done. So we get the arm on by. Have your arms in, lock your hands. So there's my hand right there on his tricep. I bring my body weight forward and there it is. Everything's locked in place now. I bring my hand out wide so we're in nice and close. Look how my foot on the other side becomes unweighted, and it's that which enables me to sweep around the corner, and there's the critical wedge position. As a result, my hands go in quite easily, my leg goes over the top, and we find ourselves in a winning position. Creating this incredibly tight wedge around your opponent's shoulder girdle is always the key to Jujigatami. Remember our mantra. Jujigatami is first and foremost a control of your opponent's shoulder, and only secondarily a submission attack upon the elbow. We always want to control the shoulder first and break the elbow second. That's always our modus operandi. Now we're looking at Jujigatami from mounted position. We've seen now how to apply a really strong connection of our hips to our opponent's shoulder. That's always our primary concern. Now the next big concern we always face is how am I going to get my cross-face leg from one shoulder to the other without exposing a wide arc which my opponent can exploit to scramble out of the Jujigatami position. I'm going to give you a trick now, so simple that when you learn it, you'll curse yourself all those times you fell awkwardly out of a Jujigatami position. I'm going to first demonstrate a very common problem I have as a coach trying to communicate Jujigatami to people. I'm sure you may recognize this problem in your own attempts. Okay, so many times I see people get into a good Jujigatami position, just like so, okay? Everything's looking good, and now it's time to pass my leg, my cross-face leg, and put it in place. And so often this is where things get awkward. I see people from here trying to take their foot over the top, and you see awkward steps, and then people sitting down awkwardly. The guy comes up, there's no cross-face leg in place, and oh no, you just lost top position, okay? Many people struggle mightily with the idea of getting their legs smoothly and efficiently over into a cross-face position. One of the golden rules of Jujigatami is if you're in top position, don't go to your buttocks until your cross-face leg is in place. That's so important, I'm going to stop and say it again. Don't go to your buttocks from a top position Juji until you have the cross-face leg in place. That's a golden rule of this particular move. So again, let's look at the potential problem here. We get a good Jujigatami position. We've got a good wedge on our training partner. We've unweighted our leg on one side and we've made a good transition in on our training partner. Okay? I want to put my cross-face leg in place. If I'm an idiot and I just sit down from here without a cross-face leg in place, that's the result. You fall down to your back, you lost everything. It's a disaster. So it's super important when we get into situations like this that I get my leg to go over the top smoothly and efficiently. If my head is upright over my own hands, disaster will always be the result, okay? Because now it's very awkward for me to try and take my foot over the top and sit, okay? We can't have that. There's a simple way for anybody, regardless of how inflexible, old, or unathletic you may consider yourself, to get the cross-face leg into position first time, every time, without a problem. Let's have a look at it. From a situation where we've gotten up into a nice high mounted position and we've turned the corner on our training partner. He's locked up his arms defensively and we're in place just like so, okay? How am I going to ensure that I make a smooth and efficient transition of my cross-face leg from his right shoulder to his left shoulder, okay? If my head is upright over my hands, the transition will always be awkward and you feel like you have poor balance and you have to kind of throw your leg over. It's a disaster, okay? So what should we do? We take our hand, we go around his leg, and I put my ear on his knee. Again, if my ear goes on Placido's knee, it's so easy for me now to effortlessly transfer my leg from one side to the other. It's a simple, simple trick. When you go to put the cross-face leg in place, put your ear on your training partner's knee or thigh, and it will be easy for you to make the transition. Again, here we are, top position. If my head is over my own hands, look how awkward I look trying to get a Jujigatami. It's an awkward fall to the mat, and it's an awkward movement to get my legs there in the first place, okay? Again, my head over my hands, you feel foolish as you try to get legs over and fall awkwardly, okay? What we want to do in these situations is bring our ear down towards the thighs. And as a result, we get very smooth and very easy transitions where I determine the speed with which I fall to the mat. Here's a valuable rule for you. I never want to fall in an uncontrolled fashion to the mat. Never. That's never an acceptable thing. When I fall in an uncontrolled fashion towards the mat, the momentum of the fall means that space develops and he pulls his elbow and he's gone. Okay? Any fall on my part towards the mat must be under full control. And the only way I can ensure that is when my ear comes down to his thigh. And as a result, it's easy for me now, under these circumstances, to take my leg across and look how now I determine how I fall to the mat. I do so on my schedule, not his. And as a result, we fall with total control of the shoulder girdle, ready to start our attacks down on the mat. So once again, from this position, I never have my head upright. That's when you get these horrible looking transitions into Jujigatami with people throwing a leg and falling awkwardly. It's a disaster. Okay. Instead, always from here, look how I bring my ear down to his thighs and knees. And as a result, it's such an easy thing for me to pass everything over the top and take my time going down to the mat with control. So there's no loss of control of your training partner's shoulder. And from here, we can go on the attack and finish the Jujigatami. One more time. We've got this punishing position where we've wedged over our training partner's shoulder. There's excellent control of the shoulder. You want to maintain that as we go hunting for the cross-face leg. So I take my hand, lock around the outside of his thigh, and put my ear where it should be, right there on his knee, close to the thigh muscle. Now when we sit down to the mat, we do so with total control. And as a result, we're in the perfect position to control the shoulder and then attack the elbow. Now, we've been through an awful lot with this mounted Jujigatami. Let's start putting things all together in one seamless whole so you can see the primary method that I coach to all of my athletes attacking Jujigatami from mounted position. We'll start with an athlete bottom mount, like so. We know now that the primary problem we're always trying to overcome is the elbow to hip structure, one of the strongest structures in the human body. So we need a specific method of overcoming this big problem. The method I always espouse is the ratchet method. Okay, let's go through that. We take our hand to the inside position. We go through and control our training partner. I slip my wrist inside my training partner's elbow as he digs in tight and works his arm in. We're always looking to bring our arm out in a wide arc. Every time we get the arm out, strong body, from here we start an action of working in the manner of a ratchet. Every time he tries to return his elbow, I use the friction with the mat to make it impossible for him to reclaim whatever it is he's lost to me. Eventually, there's going to come a point where his elbow goes above the shoulder line. That's the critical point that I'm looking for. I'm always looking to work the arm up as high as possible until I can bring my arms into a crossed arm position just like so. Then from here, we bring our chin around the corner and lock so that my hand can go to my training partner's tricep. Then I bring up the critical wedge position, where my knee comes in as a wedge, my hand goes on the floor and makes my left leg weightless. And as a result, I can easily pass around the corner and control the head. Now we get that wedge deep in behind our training partner's shoulder. My hand goes across, I make a grip, and I bring my ear down to my training partner's thigh. As a result, it's very easy for me to pass my leg under full control into a cross-face position. I never put my buttocks on the ground until the cross-face is in place. From here, my buttocks go down to the floor. I control my training partner's leg, so if he tries to get up on top, he'll never succeed. And as a result, we end up in perfect breaking position. The great rule, well, one of several great rules that we apply in this situation. If we're on top, we're never going to commit our buttocks to the floor until we have the cross-face leg in place. Let's have a look at some common errors associated with the Jujigatami. We've just seen a good application of Jujigatami. Let's look at some bad ones. That's always fun. So, here we have an opponent. Okay, first, I just go straight for the head without getting inside position. So he grabs my bicep and you'll never get a crossface. Okay, that's obviously off to a bad start. So the first thing, we always want to dominate the inside position so we can get a good crossface in place. Okay, common problem here. Guys get the wrist inside and they go straight up in a straight line. Make your arm strong. I'll never beat him in straight lines. Now he can overwrap my arm.
Overwrap your arm?
Overwrap my arm. Oh, that makes no sense. Overwrap my arm.
With this one?
With this hand here, overwrap my arm.
I apologize. Okay.
And then from here, you can bridge and roll. and take me over. So we never want to work in straight lines. I always take everything out to the side. Okay. Now here's a common problem. Guys do a good job of bringing the arm up, and then they foolishly take their hand off the mat, and then you lose everything you gained. So the whole idea is to walk everything up, move my head across, and always keep my hand in contact with the mat. Okay, I've got to be careful of my arm position. If his elbow slips inside my elbow, I lose everything. So I always want to monitor our elbow position. I walk up. If I see his elbow coming in, I'll come down to meet it and then continue my business. As he brings the elbow in, I'll bring the elbow down and continue my business until his elbow goes up high above the shoulder line. Now, common problem here, I see people come up and they don't form an effective wedge. You can still see my hand. I always want to cover my hand with the wedge. If I come up and I don't adequately cover my own hand, his elbow can come back into a good position, and now I've lost everything that I gained. It's important in these situations that I get the wedge in place. So when he tries to recover, it's physically impossible. Next big problem, people don't shift their weight, so they can never get their second leg in a good position. So here we are. Look how I shift my weight. I can't currently move my left leg into a good position, but when I shift my weight, now it's so easy for me to come around the corner. Now, lift the head, and as a result, we get the perfect wedge. I bring my arm in. Here's one of the most common mistakes that I see. People put their buttocks on the floor before they get the cross-face leg in place. That's just an invitation to disaster. Your opponent will always be able to pull his elbow free and escape. So it's incredibly important in these situations that I get my cross-face leg in place first. Common mistake, people try and do it with their head over their own hands. And as a result, they take these awkward looking steps where they fall in awkward ways down to the mat. No good. We always want to make sure we put our ear down towards his thigh. And the best way to do that is to put an outside scoop grip in place. This means that when I transition my leg from one shoulder across to the other, it's done with total control. And from this position, I can slide down to the floor at my own pace. Then from here, I catch a hold of my training partner's leg. So when he tries to get up on top, there's no way he'll take top position. We can always return him to the mat and go into our finishing positions. So those are some common errors and problems associated with the Jujigatame from mounted position, along with ways to avoid them. Putting everything together in a total package like that, you're going to have a lot of success with Jujigatame from the mount. But always remember our guiding laws of thumb. We always want to first get our opponent's elbow above the shoulder line before we begin attacking Juji. If I can't do that, I'm probably not going to attack Juji. There's better things I could do. We always want to control the shoulder first by wedging the shoulder adequately. Then we want to make the smallest possible arc of our cross-face leg from one side of his shoulder across to the other. The way to do that is to always touch your ear in towards your training partner's thigh. It's absolutely critical that we never commit our buttocks to the floor until the cross-face leg is in place. I cannot overstate the importance of this. Get the cross-face leg in first, sit your buttocks to the mat second. Then from there, when you do commit to the mat, do so with an outside scoop grip. It's going to make it so much more manageable and so much less likely that you could lose top position completely and your opponent end up on top of you. If you obey those simple rules in the manner we just demonstrated, you're going to have a lot of success finishing people from mounted position with Jujigatame.